I actually had done a presentation like this for the Regional Path Conference, and it was originally about preventing burnout for instructors. Especially, I mean, I see people there that teach a heck of a lot more than me. Like I think of Rachel and Brenda, that they really spend so much time giving, 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 and hardly ever think of themselves. And, Marnell, you and I were talking about earlier that that's just kind of what draws us to this in the first place. And I think it can sometimes, when we're not taking care of ourselves, it can lead to burnout in as instructors or even as volunteers. There's a lot of volunteers who are out there a lot. But I realized that what I'm going to talk about today is something I sort of beat the drum about in almost every area. They're techniques that can be used um, in or out of a pandemic, in or out of a work situation. And it's really, they say they're sort of a general idea of how to go about living your life in a way that you're taking care of yourself and sort of putting your own oxygen mask on first before taking care of others. And, I think women especially can be really bad at that. We want to take care of everybody else before we take care of ourselves. And taking care of ourselves, and I'm not talking about pedicures and manicures and bubble baths, although I am definitely not against any of that. I love that stuff. But it's kind of more of a like, how do we really take care of our mental health and emotional well-being? And so when the pandemic sort of came along, I think it exacerbated any sort of issues that we were already having. So if we were already a little bit depressed and anxious, maybe we became a lot depressed and anxious. If we felt lonely, we became lonelier. If we felt like we don't know our place in the world, now we really don't know our place in the world. And so it's been hard, I think, for everyone to get their sea legs. And I feel like here we are a year in, I kind of sort of feel like this is normal now and it's all getting ready to change again. So, the only thing that's consistent is inconsistency, at this point. So let's just jump right in. Well, there we go. All right. So when you think about burnout or pandemic depression, whatever you want to call it right now, I said we're burned out from, being at home, wearing masks, all of that stuff. What are some of the signs and symptoms that you're seeing in yourself and the people around you? Go ahead and jump in. And
probably a quick fuse, short tolerance level is dropped dramatically.
yes, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you see that on an interpersonal level, as well as like a national level, an international level. Everybody's sort of short fused. And I totally agree. Yeah.
I think too, just kind of a general level of exhaustion. But even when you've had good night's sleep and you haven't been doing a lot, there's just still that level of, I just don't have the energy to deal with things. And I think I've noticed with like a lot of my friends, even though we can go out and see each other and do things in certain ways now, that level of exhaustion is like, it's just too much to deal with. I want to see you. I know we can see each other now. We're comfortable with it, but I'm just too tired to like get all the pieces together to actually do it.
Yes, for sure. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was a woman who was a psychiatrist, and she kept losing her train of thought, talking about how the pandemic has really affected our neurology and mental health. And she's like, this is exactly my point. Like, I can be talking and just completely lose where I'm at. And her point was, this is really normal. Like, don't feel, when they say, oh, 30% of people are depressed, and you think, well, I'm not depressed, so I must have it together, but you're not feeling 100%. That it's normal. We should be feeling all these things right now. It's a very stressful, unprecedented time. And so this little slide, I think, kind of shows, probably it's like a glimpse into the human mind in the world right now. I think a lot of us have, we could pick out quite a few of those things. And of course, there's happy things too that have happened. But there's a lot of negative emotions going on right now.
I think too, we're so used to having like a solid foundation and a routine, and it just feels like all of that got upended. And you feel some days you just feel lost, like you got rubber legs and you just don't know which ends up. And
Mhm.
like a really good example, this just happened this week. I was supposed to be at a meeting with Tamara, and I read the email that Emmy sent out. It said be there at 9, and I wrote it down in my little paper planner that I'm old. I use paper and pencil,
Oh, I
and
do too.
I wrote that down as 10 o'clock like it was originally, and didn't make the change in the paper planner. And I signed into the meeting late. And then I spent the rest of the day beating myself up about, I've never done that in my life. I've always been, was a teacher for 28 years. We do this. And
Yeah.
this whole thing has just like, you've got it. I talked myself in later that night. Give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
You apologized, you sent an email, you did what you could. Give yourself some grace. But that's not me, to like not be on time, not be 5 minutes early, not be, and it's hard. It's that part's been really, really hard, in addition to retiring. Wow. Just
Yeah.
just a lot of fog. Like you're just walking
Yeah.
around not really sure where you are, where you're going, or why you're there.
Hmm.
So
And I think you bring up a really good point. I think we tend to hold ourselves to a lot higher standard than we would hold a friend.
yeah.
Like if you had a friend that made that same mistake, we would never say the ugly things to them that we say to ourselves when we make that kind of mistake. And so I think that's great that you're catching that thought and saying, that's interesting. I'm beating myself up over something that and you can't really make any rational reason for beating yourself up other than, you know, I think it's just that kind of that negative mindset that we all are leaning towards right now, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's my soapbox that I told you earlier. I beat the drum constantly. And, when I got married almost 30 years ago, I was uh, not balanced in this way. I love this little rock thing. I was very, very high, very emotional, very spiritual, not very physical, and I definitely prioritized feelings over thinking, which is fine. Feelings are great. But my husband taught me early on that you kind of have to find balance in all of those areas of your life. It's not that one is more important than the other. You need all of these things to kind of keep yourself in balance. And if you pull the rug out on any of them, you're going to feel a little teeter tottery. What's the word? Unstable.
Mhm.
So I've really practiced over the last 30 years trying to get sort of an even balance in all of these areas of my life and not letting one get too big above all of the others. They definitely all take different priorities at different times in life. So I'm not saying like every single day you have to be all perfectly balanced, but overall, if you're looking over a month or a year, you could say I really was pursuing all of these areas in my life. So we're going to kind of go through them one by one, and I'm going to give you guys some ideas. And then if you'd like to jump in with any ideas that come to your mind, please feel free. So the first thing that I'd love to talk about is having your mind be a big part of the balance in your life. And I've been working really hard lately on catching my thoughts. So we were just talking about you noticed, wow, I was thinking I'm beating myself up about something. And then the trick is you can't beat yourself up because you're beating yourself up. Wow, I'm so bad. I always beat myself up. I'm so terrible. But anyway, just using my mind for good and not for evil. Um, hold on, I think I have nope, that was it. So I had a few ideas. It's really as simple as just getting your thinking brain going. I think the pandemic especially kind of puts us in our lizard brain, which is our amygdala, which is the fight or flight or freeze. And so we find ourselves freaking out or panicking and freezing, fighting, which is the irritability part. And I think we would all do well to find something else to occupy our minds. We have these amazing, big, beautiful brains that we could be thinking anything we want. It's totally under our control. But often I think we're a victim. We think our thoughts happen to us instead of us choosing our thoughts. And so working on challenging our minds, and that's going to look different for everybody, but a few ideas for people who love horses might be finding some horse blogs, or there's tons of therapeutic riding blogs out there. And I can send you guys a little email after with some resource links, but even if you're not an instructor, they're super interesting. They talk about the process of teaching therapeutic riding, what might be expected of volunteers, how you might help certain kinds of riders with certain kinds of needs. They have online conferences all the time about mental health, or as it relates to horseback riding or not. So all of those are really helpful. And honestly, they help me just in my personal life, not just as an instructor. You could even go, watch a different class. If you're volunteering on a Saturday, you could always ask Emmy or Lauren, like, is there a rider that's similar to mine on a different day? And just go observe the class and just see, what's going on. How is that sidewalker helping? Or how is that horse? Maybe, if you're leading a horse and having a struggle with some aspect of horse leading, go watch another person lead that horse and see if they have any other ideas. You can take horseback riding lessons. They have them at Hearts and Horses or a million other places here. It's a great socially distanced activity. The weather's turning great. You'll learn so much about what your rider's feeling up there if you spend a little bit of time on the back of the horse. Yeah, and just articles, there's journals. There's natural horsemanship journals or dressage, like whatever you're interested in, just getting the mind thinking about things that aren't coronavirus is my point, and I found once I started down that path, I almost got obsessed because it's like an escape from reality, but it's like hyper reality. It's all great stuff that you can use in your life. And that once we're back full time, you'll be able to bring those things in with you as a volunteer at Hearts and Horses. So those are just some initial ideas. Do you guys have any other ideas about like mentally stimulating yourself or challenging yourself?
Those are really, really good ideas. I hadn't even thought of them. Because yeah, for the last couple of months, I've felt really lost. Here you think that you're going to have all this wonderful time on your hands. And I'm sure a lot of retired people go through this. You're going to have all those things, that list of things you've always wanted to do. And here you're presented with the time to do it. And I think kind of Emmy was tapping into this, the motivation, the energy level and the motivation. I mean, I've told my husband, I don't know how many times I would pay money for a drop of motivation right now. And I think you kickstart it by doing things like you said, like read a blog or listen to maybe a TED talk, or, kind of explore those things just to kind of energize you a little bit. But yeah, it's I think it's if you look at it like it's a gift of time that you can now spend on yourself and look into, some of the research, some of those things, obsess about some of those things. It's kind of, we may not have that kind of time again here shortly coming up,
Mhm.
which would
Yeah.
be really nice, but it's a gift, and so I'm trying really hard to look at it like that, and have kind of gone down a couple different rabbit holes of weird things in furniture restoration and making birdhouses and who
Absolutely.
knows whatever else.
Mhm.
Learning how to use a chop saw for the first time. But I like the idea of, this is something that I really enjoy, is being at Hearts and Horses. And I always tell Emmy I walked out of there feeling like $1,000,000
Yes.
afterward. So spend that time, kind of researching and looking into different things that involve that topic.
Yeah. And if you can also look into, I'm not sure what the situation is right now, but there's something called equine specialist in mental health and learning.
Hmm.
And some of our volunteers have expressed interest in getting certified in that. And basically you're working with the horse in a mental health therapy situation. So if you have a therapist that's doing an actual therapy session with a client and they want to use a horse in that, you're sort of you're the horse leader, but you're also the horse expert. I did that certification a few years ago and it was fascinating. And you don't have to be a rider to do it. It's more groundwork and horse handling. Again, I'll send you guys a email with all of this stuff and the names of all of it. But just the learning process through that certification was incredible. I learned so much about horses and people.
That would
throughout
be
that.
right up my alley. I'd really like that.
Great,
Yeah.
good. Well, I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not sure what it's through Path.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not sure what they have right now as far as certifications, but they
Right.
might have the information, I'm sure is on their website, where you kind of start poking around and getting started with that.
It's
Yeah, I
exactly
know.
how I got started here.
Good.
Yeah, we typically host an Eshmo workshop every like late
Mhm.
fall, like Octoberish, and we did actually host it this last year in
Wow,
August.
Wow.
So cross our fingers. That means we'll be able
another
to
one.
as
Yeah,
well.
that's great. All right, well, so you get the idea on the mental part. And part of it is just start thinking that way. Like, how can I stimulate my brain? So the brain and your mental balance is a part of that four-legged stool. The next part is what we all love, the physical self-care. um do we have are we going to gyms like this with a bunch of people without masks on right now? No. It does not have to look like this. But I have to say, food, food is fuel for our brains. I mean, I think our brains use, I don't know, I was reading something like 50 or 60% of the glucose that we eat during the day, like goes to our brain. So literally what we're eating is affecting how we're responding to all of this trauma around us. Um, so, what I really, really try with every single meal to pack as much nutrition as I can onto the plate. And so, I'm finding all kinds of fun little things, like, oh my gosh, walnuts are really, really amazing. They have omega-3s. They've been shown to help people with depression and anxiety. Every day I make a gigantic salad, at least once a day for whatever meal, sometimes breakfast, a big giant salad with kale, spinach, and arugula. Always, it's just boring. Then I throw in whatever I got, walnuts, nutritional yeast, some chicken, olives, and then just drizzle olive oil on top of it. Like whatever I can find in my cabinets that is going to feed my body and help me be able to handle all of this better, support my neurological processes, support my physical processes. I'm throwing all of that as much as I can onto a big salad, or you could do like a bowl, like a burrito bowl, something like that. So I think nutrition's a big, big part of it. Especially in the winter, I take vitamin D and, making sure I'm getting supplements, trying to get out in the sun as much as possible. And then, exercising, it looks different for everybody. But boy, it's just science that moving your body helps with the exact kind of thing that we're all going through right now. And I think that's part of why we all feel so good when we leave Hearts and Horses, because we're up, we're moving our bodies, getting the blood flowing, walking through that deep sand in the arena, and you get the endorphin rush of just moving your body after you leave there. So yeah, so I think, it's, if this part gets dropped out, we see what happens. I mean, I think we can all attest to the fact that when we're eating crap constantly and sitting on the couch scrolling through Facebook, looking at all the doom scrolling versus like going outside and listening to the birds and feeling the wind in our hair, we feel worse. It's an almost instantaneous feedback that we get from nutrition and exercise. So like, I couldn't leave that out. And it doesn't all have to be a death march. I think naps are a really great form of physical self-care, so anyway, any other thoughts on physical part of the balance?
I think
I like to do lots of like short interval physical time sometimes just to break things up. Like I know during the full shutdown, so we were all, working from home and not leaving our houses, I scheduled out every like 2 hours, just like a 10-15 minute physical break, whether it was just walking down the street to get the mail or like just something to break up that mental time.
Yes.
And just move a little bit throughout the day.
I have a friend who calls it exercise snacking. He's like, I'm gonna have a little exercise snack. So I just thought it was a great way to like put a positive spin on it. And he's nuts. He does like 50 push-ups. Like if he's working his desk, he'll get up and do a bunch of push-ups and then sit back down, or get up and do a bunch of squats, or run down the street, run back. But I love that idea of snacking on exercise because I think it makes it seem like a really positive thing. And yeah, I mean, 10,000 steps a day, they've proven over and over again is like optimal health. And so, if you got a Fitbit or a smartwatch that can keep track of steps, I find that I have to try to get 10,000 steps, and I'm pretty active. I've got a farm, I've got horses, I've got a dog that I take on a walk every day. And I still have to think, oh, I need to go for a 5-minute walk here. And I try not to get them all at one time, because you think our bodies were made to like walk long distances over the course of a day. So I prefer to like go out, do it for 5 minutes, come back and work, go out again later for 5 or 10 minutes, come back. So I try to get like walking throughout the day, but it's hard to get 10,000 steps in a day.
Or like one thing that I'll do, because especially when I'm working from home, my office is upstairs. And we have 3 bathrooms in the house. 2 of them are upstairs near my office, but one's downstairs. So I've gotten the habit, I only use the bathroom downstairs because that forces me to go up and down the stairs a lot of extra times during the day. It's just like a little thing, but can make a difference.
Yeah, I was just reading today that, sitting, it stretches out the muscles on the back side of your body and crunches up the muscles on the front side of your body, like your hip flexors, and it can cause back pain. So we need to be getting up and letting those muscles loosen up. Yeah, as many times a day as we possibly can, standing up at the desk, whatever we can do. So yeah, anything else on that topic? Or anybody have any struggles?
Yeah, it's like the first thing that we let go. Because again, like you were saying, we're women, we tackle the world. I think we should be running it, but nobody else. And it's the time, you say, oh, I don't have time for that. Yet when you don't make time for that, then everything else falls apart too. But it's always the first thing to go for me. And when it's the first thing I bring back into the equation, then everything else seems to fall into place.
It really, it's huge. Yeah,
it's
huge. And when I think I don't have time for it, all I have to do is look at that little app on my phone that tells me how many hours I've spent with a screen that day. And I have plenty of time for 20 minutes of exercise.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah.
Prioritize.
Exactly. And again, it's not, if you think about it as part of a balanced life, it's not like, oh, we want you to be balanced because we want you to be this disciplined, stoic person who never has any fun. This brings, like, having this kind of balance in these four different areas makes life better and
Mhm.
happier. It's not for nothing.
Right.
Like a lot of the other stuff we do. Like I think about the time I spend on Instagram and I literally don't remember what I saw yesterday, but except Emmy's cat. It's really cute. Like, oh, did Emmy post her cat today? But there's some stuff we do that is kind of for nothing. We don't really get any long-term value out of it, but physical self-care is definitely something we do get the long-term value out of. All right, so our next one is the emotional. This looks like me in about the course of a morning sometimes.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, so I think the biggest thing I'm finding with emotional balance is I think emotions are wonderful. I think, we're given them for a reason, but I think sometimes that leg of the stool can get a little too much and we start thinking that everything we feel is reality. And so especially in the pandemic, I'm trying to do this thing called separating stress from stressors. And if
Mm.
you think about it, a stressor it's a situation or a circumstance that you may or may not have control over that causes this thing called stress in our lives. Um, and I find that when I separate the two, and instead of saying, I'm stressed out about the crowd at the grocery store. Well, there was a crowd at the grocery store and that's a stressor, but do I have to feel stress about that? Well, that's on me. That's a choice. And it's helping me to just separate a lot of those things where I just have generally lumped into just stress in my life and starting to look at what I have control over and what I don't, and what I'm feeling versus what's actually reality. And it's helping. Like there's some things that I'm like, you know what, I'm just not going to stress about this. I can't control it, or this really isn't worth my worrying. Um, because I can worry till the cows come home and it's not going to change anything. So that's been a big one for me. And it's hard at first because sometimes you just get this general feeling of stress in life. But if you start just thinking about it, and that goes back to the mental side of things, really like sit down and think, what's stressful about this? Am I talking about the circumstance, or am I talking about my reaction to the circumstance? Our reactions are something that we can control for sure. Um,
Do you find that a lot of times the situation that you're calling the stressor it's a lot of times not in your control? I mean, things happen all the I've as I've become more aware of that, I'm really like, I had no control over this. I have no control over the traffic and the accident, right? I had no control over certain, and it just kind of helps me reframe the whole thing so that I don't, go off crazy with it.
For sure. And I
Kind of
think the
relax.
news, like, I think we all got really addicted to, I mean, for me, the news was the last thing I looked at before I turned my phone off at night. And it was the first thing I looked at when I opened it with the beginning of the pandemic, because I was like, I got to know what's going on. I have to know what's going on. Usually there was nothing I could do about it. And it just gave me this, I just feel stressed all day long. Um, and I've really had to fight trying to get out of that habit of constantly looking at the news. And, we had a horrible week here in Colorado, and I'm not advocating that we should all be uninformed about what's going on in the world, but there's a point where we're just consuming and consuming and consuming all of this fear and general stress in the world. And it's just going into our bodies and getting stuck, and then we just feel anxious all the time. So, yeah, maybe taking a look at what we're consuming as far as media goes and social media goes, and how is it making me feel? How do I feel? Do I feel better or worse when I watch the news or scroll through MSN or whatever? I used to say, back when I was good at this, I used to say I'd open up MSN to see if the world was coming to an end today. And if it wasn't, I just closed it and went on my way. And I was happy as a clam. Well, then the world did sort of kind of start ending. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I have to know everything possible. And it really like wrecked my mental health, wrecked my emotions for a good long while.
I was definitely in the same boat, and I had to step back after a while and realize this is very, it's gotten to the point where it's unhealthy. And I had to kind of find the line where my information cup was filled and then
Yes.
turn it off,
Yeah.
because I didn't need any more than that. I had the information I needed to function, and then I could go, spend my time doing something else. But yeah, I could see where it just kept, it was a vicious circle, kind of like a rabbit hole on the internet that you go down, and it just, you become addicted to having to know all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
now
and
it's just a
they did
healthy
a
balance.
study recently about how the media in general has covered different news events with particularly with COVID. And what they found was no matter what positive thing happened, the in general, the majority of media news coverage has found a way to cover it in a negative way. So if the positive news is there's a vaccine, generally you're going to see coverage about people that had a reaction from the vaccine or people who, were fighting against the vaccine. If there's a majority of states that are going down in cases, the coverage is the states that are going up. And I
Right.
think they've tapped into the fact that, we're hyper alert because we're, humans with this brain with this amygdala, we're hyper alert to danger. And so fear generates money for them,
Right.
and so then we have to just be our own advocates as to what our own limits are. And I think that's different for everybody. I think some people are very sensitive and they have a very low tolerance for all of that stuff. And just because it's out there doesn't mean you have to read it. And I try to tell myself that all the time. It's probably one of the hardest things that I deal with.
Yeah.
Another thing that we use with our changing leads kids, and I think there's still an app out there. I was using it for a while. I think it's still updated. It's called the Mood Meter. It's a super neat thing. And you can see it here. It's got like 4 quadrants, and the colors kind of relate to how that feeling would be if it was a color. So the red quadrant is like high energy, high negative feelings like worried, annoyed, furious. If you go down to the blue, those are low energy negative feelings. So mopey, glum, sad. The top part on the yellow is high energy, high good feeling. So cheerful, inspired, motivated, ecstatic. And the green is low energy, high good feeling. So satisfied, loving, content. And they found that we're sort of at our best and we have the most sort of equanimity when we're in the green. Those are kind of those emotions that we feel like we could conquer the world, we could do this forever, life is good. So what this mood meter does is you can actually track your mood every day, multiple times a day, and you click usually one of those words that kind of describes how you're feeling. And what they found in the research is when we can name the emotion that we're feeling, it automatically brings like our cortisol levels down. So if you're just feeling like this generalized stress and you don't know why, if you look up there and say, oh, it's more like worried, I'm worried about XYZ, just naming it brings your stress down. And that's just from research they've done in psychology. So then what this cool little thing does is it gives you a place where you can record why you might be feeling that way. And so you record that in there, and then it asks you, are you happy here? Do you want to stay in this place, or do you want to change to a different quadrant? And so obviously if I'm furious or irritated, I'm like, no, I don't like being in the red. I want to change to green. So I click, no, I want to change to green. And then it'll give you some ideas, some quotes, some strategies. You can record, if you're in the green, you can say, I'm in the green because I called my grandma and it made me feel really happy. And so then it'll remind you, last time you were in the green, you'd called your grandma. So you should do that. So it's a really, really cool app. It's called the Mood Meter. And a lot of people have got a lot of value out of that. I hope it's still updated because it's, like I said, a very valuable thing. And then, just some other little things. Maintaining friendships is, as hard as that is right now. I think, it's so hard. We can't see people's faces and their smiles. It's hard to get together, but boy, we're creatures that's a huge part of our health. I think I see a functional medicine doctor, and to them the pillars of health are sleep, nutrition, movement, stress management, and community. Like, to them, nutrition and community are equally as important. Like, it like not having community, not developing friendships, being together with people can seriously affect your physical health. It's not just, oh, this makes me feel better. It actually can affect your physical health. And I think they saw that like in nursing homes throughout the pandemic, like people declined physically because they weren't able to see family and their friends in the nursing home. So yeah, just being aware and looking out for things and making changes emotionally where you need to get that leg of the stool in balance. Do you guys have any other thoughts or ideas on the emotional part?
I like seeing that grid. I know that just starting out with the Changing Leads program, Tamara had referenced that. And so now I have a visual of what she was talking about.
Good. Yeah.
Very powerful. Plus, being a teacher, I've seen several similar, but not, this is very, I love the grid idea, and I like how you can move within, from one to the other. And I really, really like that.
Yeah.
I think that's, and it really does. It helps to label it when you're feeling something, to label it. And I've found just recently in dealing with something with my husband, I was feeling, I was coming across as being angry when actually, when I told him straight up, I said, I'm frightened that we're not going to be able to take care of this situation.
Yeah.
When I could label really what it was, boy, all of a sudden that motivation that I said I struggle with, I had tons of motivation, because I feel like I took that weight off my shoulder, and then I could flip over into the yellow and the green, and that was good. So putting a finger on exactly what it is, I think, is super important. And when you're working with changing leads, or when you're working with teens or children of any kind, they have a very difficult time articulating that. They have a very difficult time figuring out what that is.
Yeah.
So this gives them the vocabulary to do it,
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole point is, when we introduce this, when we go visit them in the schools before they ever come out to Hearts and Horses, and generally they know 2 or 3 words on there. Maybe depressed,
Yeah.
tired is another one. Angry is another one.
One that I hear all the time from kids, and they're 8, 9, 10 years old. I'm anxious.
Anxious. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Boy, has that word taken a beating.
Yeah.
I'm anxious, when actually maybe what they are is just shy, because it's a new situation, and they just let this real just take over, their whole experience, their whole being. And this is phenomenal. I love this. This is
Yeah,
great.
and I love the colors too, because I think it really brings home what those feelings feel like in our body and helps them sort of start narrowing down.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it can help us too. So
For sure.
yeah, good stuff. All right. So then the last one that I'd love to talk with you guys about is having a spiritual balance in our life. And of course, I'm not here to say, okay, so my church, well, if I had a church, that, I think when we think of spiritual, we automatically go to like our own personal spiritual beliefs. And I'm talking about spirituality sort of in a broader sense. Um, just this idea that there's a great big world that's bigger than me. I have a small place in it, and how do I find my legs and my balance in that? And really, I think spirituality sort of probably wraps up all those other things under its umbrella. And there's a lot of things that can upend us spiritually, like not having a good work-life balance, or, having heartbreak or death of someone that we know. And so there's a lot of things. I think sometimes we don't pay attention to the spiritual side of ourselves until there's a problem, we don't ask for help until there's a problem. So what I would like to encourage you is to find something that stimulates that part of you. For me, art and nature really, they just give you that feeling inside. I don't know. I love feeling small in the world. I love being reminded that my whole life isn't the Deb Linney show, And so for me, going up into the mountains and looking around at the great big sky and the trees and all the animals that are around me make me feel like I'm just a small part of this bigger ecosystem. So for me, that is really powerful. Yoga is very powerful for me. Church for a lot of people, and having a church community is powerful. I think Hearts and Horses has a spiritual vibe, and I don't mean that in a religious way. I just say there's something special about the energy at Hearts and Horses. It's very supportive and kind, and how everybody just pours into that place for the benefit of our writers. I mean, the number of people we have working and volunteering there compared to the number of writers we have, it's way bigger. There's all of us are there. There's so many of us there for a very few. And there's, I think, something really beautiful and powerful in that. And you can find that in a lot of different places, from the Humane Society to food banks to, there's a lot of different places in our community that have that really cool vibe. And so it's just finding what speaks to you. I find a lot of wonderful balancing opportunities in silence and solitude, just getting away by myself on a walk or a hike with no earphones, no phone, just looking around. There's retreats, in the pre-COVID days. I would go to this monastery in New Mexico by myself that was a silent monastery with these monks, and they're kind of doing their thing, and you're there kind of doing your own thing. You have meals together and nobody talks, but boy, I would come back feeling so refreshed and renewed, just, kind of going in and plugging in, being a little cog in something bigger than myself. Any other ideas on spiritual balance?
I completely agree with Hearts and Horses as being part of that piece of that balance. I didn't realize that when I started, but it was a nice little side to the whole thing that came out of it. And there's been a lot of moments like that. I think just as people, I think a lot of us are driven, some more than others, but a lot of us are driven to give back. And when we do, it fills our cup. And I think a lot of women are kind of programmed that way.
Mm-hmm.
And my initial thoughts was moving to this beautiful state from California, where so much of this doesn't exist. It didn't exist for me there. To come to this beautiful state, I felt like I had to, in order to earn my right here, I had to give something back. Like I had to go volunteer to pick up trash at the park. And then I earned my place to be in
Wow.
this great, beautiful place. Like I couldn't just come here and do nothing, take from it and not give anything back. So, honestly, just getting lost down that road and seeing that sign that said volunteers needed. And I was like, okay, well, this is a beautiful place and those horses look kind of cool. And I don't know anything about horses. I've never even touched one in my whole life, but I'm going to give that a try.
So
And,
great.
holy moly, it's just opened up this whole, you said all of this and I'm looking at all of this just yesterday morning. I was cleaning out Ben's stall, your brother's keeper there. I mean, I was cleaning out Ben's stall and he just was like, he seems so calm. I mean, he always is really mellow, but like even more so, he wasn't messing with the horse that was next to him. I think Moses wanted to pick at him a little bit. He wasn't having any part of it. He just was watching me. And so I kind of walked over to him and I was petting him and he kept putting his nose at me. So I kind of pet his nose, which I know they're not really fond of, but he let me do it. And then he just put his nose like on my mask and
Wow.
I kissed him and I thought, okay, this is really cool. Like, is anybody watching? This is so cool. But it was that connection, and that when you said spiritual, that was the first thing, that image popped into my head of just that moment in time. And that's the takeaway from Hearts and Horses. And I'm sure you could write encyclopedias of everybody that has experienced something like that being there. But that's a nice little side caveat that I didn't expect from cleaning
Right.
up horse poo.
Yeah.
Who would
I
have thought?
know. I always say, because I have horses here at my house, and I love clean and poop
Yeah, I
because they sort of wander around me. They kind of nudge me, see what I'm doing. I think sometimes when I go out there with like a mission to ride them or do something, they're like, "Oh, you're gonna make me do something." But when I'm out there working, they're just curious.
uh-huh.
And it feels like such an honor that
Yes.
these gigantic prey animals that don't have to come anywhere near me, they could
Yep.
run 10 miles away, choose to hang out with me.
Absolutely.
Really it's very, very special. And I
It
think
really
horses
is.
have there's something very unique about them, that elk or deer don't have, that are also herd animals. They just, they're very special.
Very much so. But
Yeah,
I think that spiritual thing is tap into whatever it is, just
exactly.
a mindfulness. It's good. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah, mindfulness is a great word for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and then I just had, a few random ideas that didn't seem to fit in any one category. Unplugging from technology, always good, something we can't be reminded of enough. Um, Taking little micro breaks throughout your day, especially if you're working. Just, where you step away from whatever it is you're doing and go outside, or, put your nose in a good book or something like that. Um,
Can I
take
share really quick? Like
Yeah, of
my
course.
son, he's a senior at CSU and he'll be graduating in May. And he's taken an exceptional load of classes this semester just to get done.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of finish up stuff that's coming up. And, he's had one test, one project, one after another. And it's like, boy, I remember those days well. And he said to me the other day, he goes, he went out fishing for the first time. I guess it's kind of getting to the point where he can get out there and do some fly fishing, out in the river. And so he was doing that and he came back and he's like, yeah, he caught a couple of fish and he was really excited. He seemed completely different. And I said to him, when you're out there, I said, are you just worried? You're out there and you're spending 2-3 hours walking the river. I said, are you just worried about this project, that project, this project? He goes, no, that's the point. I'm out there and I don't think of another thing other
Yes.
than me and that fly and that fish. And
What a gift.
yeah. And I thought, dude, you just tapped into something that is going to be hugely important for you for the rest of your life. Like you found something. When you can find that escape like that,
Mhm.
that's important, that you found it and you have it. And I thought that was really super cool.
That's so great. And I think For me, horses are very much that, partly because you need to be really in the moment and aware. You could get run over. If I'm out there with my horses and not paying attention, if they spooked at something, I wouldn't be able to get out of the way in fast enough time. So part of it is just I need to stay in the moment to stay safe, but they're so in the moment, they're wherever they are. When Ben had his lips touching your mask, that's all he was thinking about, you
Mhm.
know. He wasn't
Mhm.
really thinking about they can't really live in the past or the future. They're where they are right now.
Yep.
So there's a power to that. And I think we can take that to, having dinner with our family. Are we really there with them? Or are we earlier in our day? Are we tomorrow? Are we on our phones in the news in another state? Um, all of these things can really upend our balance, I think, if we're not purposeful about choosing those things.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
yeah. So I just have no reason. I just love that picture. My answer is okay, sure. Of course I will. I'll take you home.
You don't have to ask me twice.
Nope.
Oh,
So that's all I've got today, unless any of you guys have anything else to add or any other questions, or you need some strategies for something that's going on.
no, I appreciate just how you laid this out, and it just really has got me thinking, and also kind of reaffirmed a little bit that I'm on the right track. I've had
Good.
the rug royally yanked out from underneath me, and that's okay, because there is something great in every day that comes along. And the fun part maybe is just not knowing for the first time in your life what that's going to
Yeah.
be.
Where the wind
So
takes you.
yeah, yeah.
Good.
And I think having an open mind is really super important, so that you can learn new things, and you take what works, and maybe walk away from what doesn't. So
Yeah,
it's fun.
for
It's good.
sure.
That is a beautiful picture, by the way.
Isn't it? I found it online somewhere and I just thought it was so wonderful. And I
Oh,
tried when I did my little Prezi, like for the mental, I tried to zoom into where his brain is, and for the spiritual, where his heart was.
yeah.
So
It's really beautiful. That's really cool. I like that. I like the connection.
good. Well, I have a Word document with all of my ideas on it, and I didn't even talk about them all. So I'll just send that to Emmy, and that way, as a Word document, you can just keep a running thing where you can even add to it if you find things. That way, if you're feeling a little stuck, you can refer back to it and say, "Oh yeah, like I could go on this website or whatever it is. Take a
Yeah.
nap, eat a salad."
Yeah. I would like that.
Yeah.
That would be great.
All right. Well, if you guys don't have anything else, that's about it for me.